Peace be with everybody. It's hide and seek. Thank you all for watching. I'm about to delve into another segment of the Redbones. Right quick, like once again, just for further edification, like I said in previous videos in this series, this is nothing to do with, like I said, in a sense of dealing with just people, or women or men or anything of that nature, like regular people. This is not to offend anybody. This is all going into how they operate, like I said, through their sororities, through their masonry, through their Hollywood, everything of that nature, of how they use a certain image, you know what I mean, to bewilder the people and to, cast people into a high level of delusion. So first off, I'm gonna delve into this right quick. So yes, I'm gonna be delving into the whole aspect of the food cooking and things like that. So I'm gonna be delving into this. I'm gonna put the other videos that I did in this series in the comment section below. It's all a must see. This is very serious information. So obviously the Klay Thompson, the NBA player Klay Thompson, and how he's with Megan Thee Stallion. So the Megan Thee Stallion to be what you call a red bone. And you see how he's like he loved eating the spaghetti. So anyway, people who know about the spaghetti and all of that anyway, the rituals they do with the spaghetti with the blood and all of that. But if you remember the movie Manchurian Candidate, remember that all goes to the MK Ultra. Now I'm not just talking about the spaghetti, you know what I mean, things of that nature. But I'm just talking about like the symbology of why they do the ritual. Because when you understand that, as it's written that the blood of the Lamb cover us all. Those who have faith, in God, the blood of the Lamb covers us. So, they do it on their side where they want to be that mediator themselves. So, as it's written, for those who have the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him, but we had the mind of Christ. So, you see, having the mind of the Lord. So, remember on that Manchurian Candidate, when they ate the noodles, it represented how the brain looks. You kind of see what I mean? So, it goes to MK Ultra mind control. So that's why a lot of the witches like to use the blood and the spaghetti and all of that, because that blood, like I said, represents the blood of the Lamb, blasphemy. But in Revelation 17:6, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yeshua. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. So that goes into the mother Babylon, being drunken on the blood of the saints, warring against the kingdom of heaven all day. So you see how remember how Lotto be talking about, yeah, I'm cooking now, and this and that. Talking about Lotto, talking about I'm cooking, you know what I'm saying? And if you remember Mortal Kombat, remember Scarlet used to use blood to attack. Remember she used to throw blood and everything. You remember that? That's why back in the 50s, you remember I Love Lucy, hint Lucifer, I Love Lucy. You remember Ricky Ricardo would come in the door, Lucy, where's my dinner? Remember he used to do all of that. So that whole thing goes to how they had the women cooking. They had to do that in the 1950s. Women nurture the family. I'm not saying it like that, but I'm just talking about like in Hollywood, how they project that. So they had the women cooking and things like that. And then around the daughter would be learning it. And they remember down that line that came around the Barbie doll era. Because now they're getting ready to push women into that whole theme of, becoming your own God. You know what I'm saying? Because now a Barbie is what you can create, and you can create an image. And that's what programs people. So that's why now you got people saying, I'm a Barbie, like Ice Spice, Nicki Minaj, etc. I'm bad like the Barbie, So, in Number, they do all that cooking ritual because remember in Numbers 11, as remember during the first Exodus with Moses, were crying to eat flesh. Remember the Lord said he sent them bread, but instead they didn't want the bread, that they wanted flesh. Remember? So let's go into Numbers 11:18, and say thou unto the people, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh, for ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt, therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and ye shall eat. Remember when he gave them flesh, what happened? Remember they ended up being buried. The plague was sent. Remember he sent the plague through the quail. So you understand that whole thing of eating that flesh is serious, because it goes to like that whole thing with original sin, like I explained a few years, like a little while back. So that whole thing goes to that original sin of the tree of life and of death. Your eyes will be open, ye be as gods, because it goes the living animal, and it goes to that death when they kill, and then now they goes into the whole aspect. When you understand how the digestive system works, the digestive system works to where you eat, and your belly is like the pit. It's like the belly. That's why it goes into the whole theme of the pit. It goes right through the digestive system, and it gets sent down into the bowels. Because remember, as it's written, the word of God, remember how it speaks about the bowels representing like going into the earth. Remember it said how Christ spent 3 days, 3 nights, in the bowels of the earth. So that whole thing goes into that whole aspect. It represents the pit. Remember, the body is a temple of God. So when they doing that, it's like, you basically playing God. You the one who making that choice of what gets sent into the bowel, into the pit. It's just symbolically of why it's like that. So those witches know that. Those warlocks know that. That's why they focus on how they feed people. That's why they tell people you should eat 3 times a day. Eat your eggs. Eat your sausage. And stuff like that. Everything they show, McDonald's, everything they show is advertising death. It said, God is the God of the living, not of the dead. So that's why they already had that set up where everything will be, the woman to be cooking her husband, flesh. Because that goes back to Adam and Eve. Like I explained it before, that's how they got cast out the garden. That's what the serpent taught them, was the ways of death, life and death. Ye shall not surely die once you eat this thing. You see what I'm saying? And that's why they do it throughout, throughout the way they train the women. You cook your man a steak, you cook him some wings, you cook him some chicken Alfredo, cook him some spaghetti with some catfish. It's all connected. And that's why they use women in the banks. Women, like I explained, different careers. They use the women they use that are agents that they set up in there, the bank tellers, etc. The CNAs, like I explained in previous videos, the flight attendants, etc. Because the banking anyway goes into the treasures of heaven blasphemy. Lucifer was cast out of heaven, so he remember all of that. So at the end of the day, he used it on the earth. Even as it's written, Satan is the god of this world, but Christ is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, bringing the new kingdom of the Father. So that whole theme is very important, because the whole aspect of dealing with the treasures of heaven, because the kingdom of heaven is as a bride anyway. So that's why they like to use the women dealing with the treasures. This stuff is serious. So that's what that whole thing is about. As it's written, I protest by your rejoicing which I have in Christ our Lord. I die daily. So we dying daily, we overcoming the flesh. So that's why they want to use that whole thing with that aspect of everything. We die daily because we overcome every day. Beating sin and things of that nature. So the devil want to get the mind of Christ out of people. That's why they love using the spaghetti, because they go into the brain blasphemy, and then that blood goes into that mother Babylon that they worship, so forth. That's why everything deals with the dead presidents. Because we die daily. So that's why they operate with the banking, the women, the agents, It all goes to that Redbone spirit, you know what I'm saying? Like I explained what that Redbone is, it goes into being covered in sin. And they want to keep the bones of Israel, keep the bones of the kingdom of God, the saints, dead, not knowing the truth. Keep people dead in ignorance, That's why they do the dead presidents. That's why you see female mosquitoes are just symbolic of why nature is designed how it is. That's why female mosquitoes use the blood to become reproductive. They use blood for that. So you see in this realm, that's what they do. They use, those witches are aware of nature and everything. So that's why they love that blood, you know what I'm saying? Because that whole thing goes into how they can control the men and vice versa. The men, when they high level warlocks and they sent out there to disrupt, real people lives, destroy women lives. It all goes to that whole aspect. It's all the same spirit. Remember Lil Wayne had the song, I like 'em red, I like 'em long hair, thick red bone. Remember that? I like 'em long hair, thick red bone. Remember I was explaining about Louisiana with the red bone culture. Because that's why I was explaining, through the South. Remember how they had the brothels and things like that, the madams, the brothels. And like I had explained in the last video with Sunshine from Harlem Nights. Remember how in Harlem Nights, how Sunshine, they used to send her to go get targets and they send her to seduce people, remember? So all of that stuff is what they do. The Redbones, they'll set them up, they'll use them in the brothels so that men can be seduced and bewildered. You know what I'm saying? They using spells and everything to overtake men. That's why Boosie on Wipe Me Down, he said Redbones, Caramel, all of them stop and stare. All of them trying to steal my underwear. Going into the witchcraft. It's serious. Excuse the language in this, but Lil Wayne, this isn't walk-in. So you see how he said, onto the kitchen where my witches keep it brewing. So you see that whole thing, Bucky buck naked. Look at all my girls, bodies. I'm just going to use that. This is all symbolic blasphemy, but I'm just going to keep it straightforward. So you see how he says, onto the kitchen where my witches brewing. And they all butt naked. But he said, I'm crucial. Don't mean to spook you. But this is New Orleans, so my queens do voodoo, So you see how he's saying that. That whole thing goes to that witchcraft with the cooking, etc. Remember how I was explaining about that? I'm going to get into this whole aspect. I'm going to go deeper into like a lot of them. Trina, a lot of them, But the whole thing with the Redbones and how they use that, that's why Beyonce had to be paired with Jay-Z. They got to pair certain people with certain people to really magnify that person's potential. You kind of see what I mean? So in that instance, Jay had to be with Beyonce because they had to, magnify. Remember, he goes by Hove. That's just Jehovah blasphemy. You know what I'm saying? So that whole thing with Beyonce, that higher, like one of the highest level of Redbones you can get in the industry. High level witch. You see what I'm saying? That's why Jay-Z heavy on that 444 because, they heavy on that working in the law blasphemy. The 44 dealing with the law. So they want to do their law, keep their law of lawlessness, working in people's lives, So they already know about the original sin anyway with the, dealing with the animals because as it's written, he that killeth an ox is as he who slew a man. You see what I'm saying? And as it's written too, like I got a breakdown on this. I could put that out in the comment section. But let my prayers be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. So you see all of that goes into how, they try to, we still, eating flesh is the closest way into the whole thing, but it's the original sin. And that's why they set women up to cook how they do. Remember Eve? Remember she the one who gave Adam the fruit, said we didn't die. The fruit is just going into how the animals were made, out of the fruit with the seeds of the fruit off the tree. The Father used those seeds to bring forth the animals. You know what I'm saying? Like how, how people can say they plant, say for instance, people who are familiar with gardening, right? How they say you got your pineapples or, you'll take apart, you'll take the layer of the pineapple from the top. You'll cut that, you'll plant it in soil, and now you got more pineapples. Or vice versa with watermelon with the seeds and so forth. They bring more watermelon, you know what I'm saying? So it's all connected. You see how remember Sierra had the song Goodies back in the day. People look at me and think that I'm, young, well, I'm not, that you gotta have it, I work my body, and all that stuff, My cookies in the jar. Oh, yeah. Talking about the cookies in the jar, because that whole thing, a cookie anyway just goes to blaspheming the bread of life, which is just Christ. And they want to, she say, her cookies in the jar because they want to keep the truth hidden. They don't want people to know what's going on. You know, the cookie in the jar. They don't want people knowing what's really going on and seeking the Lord. Just keep him hidden. You know, keep him in that mason jar. You know, those sorority, those fraternity boulets, the black boule mason jars. You know, this is serious. And that's why they like to use that, you know, just for discretion, but the P word cat, you know what I'm saying? They like to use that talk because remember, as it's written, Satan is as the lion seeking whom he may devour. So they want people chasing after the cat. They want people to chasing after Lucifer. You know, a man out there trying to chase after the woman and get sent into the sunken place. You kind of see where I'm going with this. And vice versa, women with the men being deceived. So that's why they got it set up in the gyms where, you know, they already had the women in the gym. You know, we already know we can exercise for the kingdom's sake. But they want them, you know, the body is a temple of God. But they want them to be their own God, so it's their own temple, and they, you know, they do what they want, and they use it to seduce more men. I got to get my body, my legs a little thicker. Let me do these Pilates, etc. You know. That's as written in 1 Timothy 4:8. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and that is of that which is to come. So you see how all that comes together. And that's why you got your people like India Westbrooks and all of them, you know, Lotto and all of them. Yeah, I'm in the gym. You know, I'm getting fit. I'm in the gym. Yeah, you know, like you gotta have $2 million. You gotta have $2 million to talk to me. $2 million. You gotta be in a certain bracket. If you ain't got $1 million, you can't talk to me. You know what I mean? That's the stuff they do. You know? And we gonna definitely get into this right quick. So that's why they love to do that, looking in the mirror, you know, and all of that stuff, because, you know, as it's written, you know, we see through the mirror darkly, you know what I mean? We see Christ darkly through the mirror. You know, it's just symbolic of like understanding the looking glass and things of that nature, and understanding the prophecies and the revelations, because what they want to do is, you know, they want people caught up in vanity. So that's why they use certain women and everything like that, the certain image of these women. Remember, that goes back to like the 50s. Remember, like back in the day, how they have the Hebrew on there, the so-called black lady on there, and they have the light-skinned so-called black lady on there, and they'll be like, this is sale. And then you have the darker one that'll be like, oh man, you know, this, you know, it's colorism. Why we can't be beautiful? They do all kind of things to kind of create ruckus and chaos amongst real people. So real people will see that, like, man, you know, she's beautiful. Yeah, but it's just light skin. That's the only reason why they're saying it. That's just the way they take these things. Because they can use the Redbone stuff on all kind of avenues to where it can get in a level of ignorance or it can be sophisticated. Everything is ignorance, you know, people destroy for lack of knowledge. But I'm talking about, like, they can use it like in a sense of negative low level energy, people fighting over color, or they'll use it like in a sense of, you know, where people feel empowered by it. You kind of see what I mean? Like, because they want to be one, you know. So it all goes back to like during the time of Nimrod, you know, which is the forefather of Babylon. You know what I'm saying? Everything goes into that one. Remember how in Louisiana, everything is obviously was mixed up during that time, because you had people coming in from France and a lot of other places, you know, during the slave trade through the Louisiana ports. So, you know, a lot of people was mixing. So, you know, obviously people don't know this knowledge, have this understanding. And, you know, they don't want people knowing that. So they want people caught up in that deception. And like, that's why you have like Cardi B, you know, the whole theme of the Redbone. They do all that leopard and everything like that. That leopard print, cheetah print, and all of that, because it goes straight into the pan God. You know, the God pan. You kind of see what I mean? This is very important to seduce men. Same thing too, that's why they use the nails. Oh, I gotta get my nails done. You know, with their nails, and they like claws of the leopard, you know what I mean, of the panther. You feel me? And so forth. And that's why it goes to the weave and all of that too, cause they want to just take the hair of the animals, you know, and things of that nature, and create their own, you know, false Jerusalem. You know what I mean? Everything come together. That's why they had the women wear the weave and all of that. It's like and even though people now becoming more natural with their hair, you know, thank the Father, you know, people waking up. But like, yeah, you know, people who wearing the weaves and all of that, that all goes to like that false, you know, false hair of the animals and things of that nature. The mascara, you know what I mean? You know, Kara is within the mascara. Now, Kara just means the face. So that goes into like the face of God that they want to cover up. You know, it's a straight Jezebel spirit. You remember during the time of Nimrod, they all want to be working in one tongue. He said he wanted to build that Tower of Babel so that he can climb up and go slay the Son of God. You know, this stuff is serious. So remember during that time in Genesis 11:4, and they said, "Go to and let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the whole face of the earth." See? So that whole theme of painting their face with makeup and all of that stuff is very serious, because, you know, it goes right into 2 Kings 9:30. You know, which goes right to when Jezebel was painting her face. You know what I'm saying? Looking out the window. You know. And when Jehu was coming to Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face, tired of her head, and looked out at the window. So that's what they be doing. The whole theme is all just to throw people off track. You know what I'm saying? Get people damaged. You know, wasting people time. You know, unnecessary this, unnecessary that. You know what I mean? It's very important knowledge, man, to understand what they doing to people's souls and what they've been doing. But I'm going to end that right here. Like I said, this is something I'm going to be doing quite a few, because there's so much information. But I'm going to end that right here. Thank you for watching How to See TV. Much more is coming, man. Peace.